Hi, in this video, I want to talk about intellectual humor and cleverness. I think intellectual humor and cleverness are not necessarily innate, born qualities that somebody has, although some people might start off with a baseline of just being generally funnier. But I think these are some things that you can actually skill up and develop over time. And so with intellectual humor, just higher brow type humor, more what's the word? I'm not gonna say like superior, but just like more highbrow, more artistic, eclectic humor. That's not something that's generally in the milieu of most people's consideration. Most people have lowbrow humor. I mean, I have elements of lowbrow humor for sure, where you're just kind of talking about just, whether it's like toilet humor or just like dirty jokes or things like that. That generally gets laughs. But if you can have this more higher intelligence when it comes to humor, you kind of set yourself apart. And so one way that you can improve that is by just being very well read, by consuming lots of different sources, a lot of different information, by studying joke structure, by studying the greats who actually, have done jokes and stuff like that. I think a good example of somebody who kind of, moves between high and lowbrow humor is like the late great George Carlin, because he would talk about just like the dirtiest like toilet humor type stuff, but then he would go on these crazy soliloquies and diatribes about the state of the world. And I know he was more cynical in nature, but he was just very intellectual and poetic in how he delivered his messages. So intellectual humor and cleverness are things that you can build by just increasing your aptitude for more, for different versions and perspectives on reality, based off of what you read and things like that, and just trying out different types of humor with your friends or people that you're around. Again, I can't speak from a perspective of being super intellectually humorous myself. I remember when I did, amateur open mic comedy, I remember like cursing a lot. Like it was a long time ago, and I did that out of the thought that if I cursed more, people would find it more funny, because the people I find funny, they seem to curse a lot, right? But a lot of people didn't really like that. One of the most difficult things that I found was when I was in a college, theater performance. I was supposed to do comedy during the intermission, and the audience that would come to those performances aren't just, people who come to a nightclub like a regular comedy venue. These are like donors of the school and like, older academics, blah, blah, blah. So I found it extremely difficult to come up with a routine that was both clean and funny at the same time. But I think it made me a much better communicator overall, and I would challenge those out there who are interested in pursuing comedy, or they want to just be funnier in general, not to rely on just like the toilet humor or the cursing or the dirty jokes and stuff like that. Like, yeah, they might get laughs with like your buddies, but they're usually more just like off-brand and not super relatable to, donors of a university or people who are more highbrow, if you will. So again, I guess the biggest takeaway from this is if you want to increase your aptitude for comedy, for humor, for intellectual humor, and for cleverness, you just have to be well read, have a wide range of different perspectives that you're consuming on a daily basis. And then that will manifest itself in your communication with other people, because you'll make more associations and you'll find things funnier because you have a much grander vocabulary and a lot more to draw from. So comedy is not this super esoteric thing. Again, there's plenty of books out there about it. There's classes and things that you can take. But if you want to stem more into like the intellectual, more highbrow comedy, you just have to consume different mediums that, appeal to that. And then as far as cleverness just comes from just making really, interesting, nuanced observations about typical things, and then just putting it into sophisticated language. That's at least how I see cleverness. So that can be done, again, by just immersing yourself in different vocabularies, different perspectives, and then trying it out on friends, groups, venues, wherever you want to go with it. But I think it is something that I think people should, strive to kind of look at more so than just kind of like that lowbrow humor, which is easy to conceptualize and to deliver. But again, it's easy. You want to go for something a little bit more challenging that kind of sets you apart. So I hope that made sense. I'll see you in the next one.